welcome to the International Academy of Macomb's presentation of Ayn Rand's Night of January 16th. We're excited for you to be here tonight and to see our work and all the work of our fantastic students. Please make sure that your cell phones are turned off for this evening's performance. This evening's performance is unique in that you, the audience, get to participate in our show as cast members. The courtroom clerk will call your seat letter and number, and they will invite you up to be part of our show as a jury member in our murder trial. If you do not want to be part of our show, just shake your head no, and the court clerk will pick another seat, and someone else will get the opportunity to come up on stage. At each jury seat, there are directions, and the judge will direct you through the play on what you should do. Please feel free to react appropriately with your facial features to the testimony, to the court proceedings. Please do not react overtly or inappropriately or distract the audience's attention from the actual action of the play. Terrence Mann is quoted as saying that movies make you famous, television makes you rich, but theater makes you good. I'm very proud to introduce you to our really good kids. Thank you.
Court, attention! All rise. Superior Court Number 11 of the State of New York. The Honorable Judge, Willow Heath presiding.
People of the State of New York, Mrs. Karen Andre.
Ready, Your Honor.
Ready, Your Honor. Bailiff, clerk, draw jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are to be the jurors in this case.
12 of you will be selected to perform this duty.
You will kindly step up here, take your seats, and receive your instructions from Judge Heath.
When your seat number is called, please join the bailiff up on stage. A13. F42. F43. N51. K27. H25. J3. C14. D30. D39. G21. C32. N9. L29. A8. F38. J38. J38. E2. C10. J24. N6. H4. Hi, Steven. And that's a jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are the jurors who will try this case. At its close, you will retire to the jury room and vote upon your verdict. At the end of each day's session, the bailiff will escort you to the jury room. I instruct you to listen to the testimony carefully and pronounce your judgment to the best of your ability and integrity. You are to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty, and her fate rests in your hands. The district attorney may now proceed.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on the 16th of January near midnight, when the lights of Broadway blazed electric dawn over the festive crowds below, the body of a man came hurtling through space and crashed, disfigured mess at the foot of the Faulkner building. That body had been Sweden's great financier, Bjorn Faulkner. He fell 50 stories from his luxurious penthouse, a suicide, we were told. A great man unwilling to bend before his imminent ruin. A man who found a fall from his skyscraper shorter and easier than a descent from his tottering throne of the world's financial dictator. Only a few months ago, behind every big transaction of gold in the world stood that well-known figure. Young, tall, with an arrogant smile, with kingdoms and nations in the palm of one hand and a whip in the other. If gold is the world's lifeblood, ladies and gentlemen, then Bjorn Faulkner, holding all its dark, hidden arteries, regulating its ebb and flow, its every pulsation, was the heart of the world. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the world has just had a heart attack, and like all heart attacks, it was rather sudden. No one suspected the gigantic swindle that laid the foundation of the Faulkner enterprises. Only a few days after his death, the earth shook from the crash of his business as thousands of investors were stricken from the paralysis that often follows an attack after that monster's heart stops beating. Bjorn Faulkner had a hard struggle facing the world, but he had a much harder struggle facing what was in his heart, a struggle in which this trial will have to uncover. 2 women ruled his life, ladies and gentlemen, and his death. Here is one of them, ladies and gentlemen, Karen Andre, his efficient secretary and notorious mistress. But only 6 months ago, Bjorn Faulkner had come to America in order to get a loan to save his own fortune. Fate sent him a means to save his own heart through the innocence of a young girl and his young bride, and now his widow, Nancy Lee Faulkner, only daughter of John Graham Whitfield, our great philanthropist. Bjorn Faulkner thought he had found salvation and innocence through the virtuous innocence of his young bride. And his best proof of it, ladies and gentlemen, is that only 2 weeks after his marriage, he dismissed his secretary, Karen Andre. But, ladies and gentlemen, one can only guess what hatred and revenge smoldered in her very heart and then leapt into flame on the night of January 16th. Bjorn Faulkner did not kill himself. He was murdered by the very delicate and capable hands of the woman you see here right before you. The same hands that helped to raise Bjorn Faulkner high above the world, the same hands that threw him down from as great a height to crash to a pavement as cold as that woman's heart. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what this trial is going to uncover. Our first witness is Dr. Kirkland.
Dr. Kirkland? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
Tamara Kirkland.
Your occupation?
I'm the medical examiner of this county.
In the course of your duty, what were you called upon to do on the night of January 16th?
I was called to examine the body of Bjorn Faulkner.
And what did you find?
Body mangled to an extreme degree.
And what did you establish as the cause of death?
A fall from great heights.
How long had Faulkner been dead when you examined his body?
I reached the scene about half an hour after the fall.
Judging by the condition of the body, could you say exactly how long it had been dead?
No. Owing to the cold weather, the blood, it had coagulated immediately, allowing for a difference of several hours to be impossible to determine.
So therefore it is possible, doctor, that the body had been dead longer than half an hour.
It is possible, yes.
Could his death have been caused by anything other than this fall?
I found no evidence of it.
For instance, had his skull been broken before the fall, would you be able to determine this by examining the body?
No. Due to the condition of the body, it'd be impossible to determine.
Thank you, doctor. That's all.
Did you find any trace of any such wound in your examination of the body, Dr. Kirkland?
No, I did not.
Did you find any indication that death could have been caused by anything other than this fall?
No, I did not.
That's all.
John Hutchins?
John Hutchins? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, sir, I do.
What is your name?
John Joseph Hutchins.
Your occupation?
I'm the night watchman in the Faulkner building, sir.
Mr. Faulkner owned any business offices in that building?
Yes, sir, he did.
And do you know who owned the penthouse on the roof of that building?
Certainly, sir, Mr. Faulkner did.
And who lived there?
Mr. Faulkner and Miss Andre, sir. That is before the marriage.
And after the marriage?
After the marriage, Miss Andre lived there by herself.
Have you ever seen Mr. Faulkner calling upon Miss Andre after his marriage?
Only once, sir.
And that was?
On the night of January 16th.
Tell us about it, Mr. Hutchins.
Well, it was about 10:30.
How do you know the time?
Well, I come on duty at 10, sir, and it was no more than a half hour later. So the entrance door bell rang, and I went downstairs and opened the door, and it was Miss Andre, and Mr. Faulkner was with her. And I was a little surprised by that because Miss Andre does have her own key, and usually she opens the door by herself.
Was she alone with Mr. Faulkner?
No, sir, there were two other gentlemen with them.
And who were they?
I'm not sure, sir.
Have you ever seen them before?
No, sir, never.
What did they look like?
Well, they were tall and slender, both of them. One of them had sharp cheekbones, as I can remember. The other one, well, I couldn't really see his face at all, sir, on account of his hat being all crooked over his eyes. He must have had a bit too much, sir, meaning no disrespect.
So what do you mean?
Well, he was a bit tight, sir. He wasn't really steady on his feet. Mr. Faulkner and the other gentleman had to help him. They almost dragged him into the elevator.
Mr. Faulkner looked worried?
No, sir, on the contrary, he seemed rather happy.
You look like a man contemplating suicide.
We object, Your Honor. Objection sustained.
The others in the party seemed happy that night?
Yes, sir. Miss Andre was smiling. Mr. Faulkner laughed when they went into the elevator.
Did you see any of them leave that night?
Yes, sir. The first one came down the elevator about 15 minutes later.
And who was that?
The drunken one, sir. He came down the elevator all by himself. He
Did you
didn't
see
seem
where-
so drunken no more. Though.
Sorry, sir.
He didn't seem so drunken no more. He could walk, but he staggered a little bit.
Did you see where he went?
Well, I went to offer him the door, seeing the condition he was in, but he noticed me coming, and he went right out and got into a car parked right at the entrance, and did he step on it? I'm sure he didn't get far. The cops must have gotten him.
What makes you think that?
Well, I couldn't help but notice a car that started right after him. Defendant will please keep quiet.
Miss Andre, please allow me to do the questioning. I may satisfy your curiosity. Just wanted to ask what car, Mr. Hutchins?
It was a big black sedan, sir, parked 2 cars away from him.
And who was in it?
I saw only one man.
What makes you think he was after the first car?
Well, I couldn't be certain that he was. It just seemed funny that they started at the same time like that.
Did you see that other guest of Miss Andre's leaving too?
Yes, sir. It was about 10 minutes later when he came down the elevator.
And what did he do?
Nothing unusual. He did seem to be in a bit of a hurry, though. He went right out.
And then what happened?
Well, I started on my rounds of the building, and it must have been an hour later, I heard screams outside in the street. So I raced downstairs, and when I got to the lobby, I saw Miss Andre running out of the elevator. Her gown was all torn, and she was sobbing loud-like. I raced after her, and we pushed through the crowds, and it was Mr. Faulkner. He was all over the pavement.
And what did Miss Andre do?
She screamed. She fell on her knees, and it was awful, sir. I've never seen a body so smashed like that.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. That is all.
You said that you had never seen Mr. Faulkner calling a Miss Andre after his marriage, with the exception of that night. Now, tell me, do you always see everyone who enters the building at night?
Well, no, ma'am. I'm not in the lobby all the time. I do have my rounds to make, so if the guest does have his key, I guess he could come in and I wouldn't see him at all.
In other words, Miss Andre might have had any number of visitors, Mr. Faulkner included, whom you never saw come in.
Yes, ma'am. That's quite right.
That's all.
Homer Van Fleet?
Homer Van Fleet?
I've been drinking. I get filthy when I liquor gets to me. I've been thinking, why can't I keep my fingers off it, baby? I want you, not now. Why can't I keep my fingers off it, baby? I want you, not now. Scars on ice. Felt like an animal. These cameras all in my flashing lights.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Name?
Homer Herbert Van Fleet.
Occupation?
Private investigator.
What was your last assignment?
Shadowing Mr. Bjorn Farr.
And by whom were you assigned to do this?
By Mrs. Bjorn Faulkner.
Were you shadowing Mr. Faulkner the night of January 16th?
I was.
Can you tell us about it?
I'll start at 6:13 p.m.
How do you know the time, Mr. Van Fleet?
It was part of my duties. I had to record it and report it to Mrs. Faulkner.
I see.
6:13 p.m. Mr. Faulkner leaves his home on Long Island, dressed formally, drives his car himself, alone. Special notation. He drives at an unusual speed all the way to New York.
Where does Mr. Faulkner go?
He drives up to the Faulkner building and goes in. It's now 7:57 p.m. All offices closed. I wait outside in my car. 9:35 p.m. He comes out with Miss Andre, trying to dress formally. Special notation. She wears a corsage of orchids of unusual proportions.
Where do they go?
No one's perfect in this world.
What do you mean?
I mean, I lost them. Due to Mr. Faulkner's speed and to an accident.
What accident?
My left fender crashing into a truck. Damage for which we're charged, Mrs. Faulkner.
And what did you do after you lost track of them?
They go back to the Faulkner building and wait.
When did they return?
10:30 exactly. A gray car falls. Mr. Faulkner gets out and helps Miss Andre. While she rings the doorbell, he opens the door to the second car. A tall gentleman, dressed formally, steps out. Together, they help out a third gentleman, the latter wearing a dark gray sports coat. Special notation. The latter shows signs of inebriation.
And then what did you do?
I go to Gary's Grill across the street. I must explain, I allow myself time to take nourishment every 4 hours, and the 4 hours had elapsed since we left Long Island. I go up and I sit by a window where I can watch anchors.
And what did you observe?
Nothing. For 15 minutes. The man in the gray sports coat comes down and starts a car at the curb. Obviously in a hurry. He heads south.
Did you see the other stranger leave?
10 minutes later, he gets in a car at the curb. I don't know how he got there, but I guess he had the keys, because he gets in and drives away. So,
You ever seen Mr. Faulkner with these two men before?
no, it's the first time I ever saw him.
And what did you do after they left?
Well, Mr. Faulkner is now alone in the penthouse with Miss Andre, and I must admit, I'm curious. But professionally, I have a special observation post I've used it before.
And where is that?
Skytop nightclub, roof of the Brooks building, 3 doors down from the Faulkners. They have an open dance floor there with a gallery off of it. You can go out and see the penthouse clear as the palm of your hand. I go out, I look, and I yell.
What do you see?
No lights. Karen Andre's white gown shimmering in the moonlight. She's hoisting a man's body onto the parapet. A man in evening clothes. Faulkner. He's unconscious. There's no resistance. She pushes him over with all of her strength and he goes over. Down. Down in his face.
And then what happened?
I go back into the dining room and yell about what I'd seen. A crowd follows me and we arrive at the Faulkner building. With Mr. Faulkner, bloody mess on the pavement. Miss Andre sobbing over it, bit from a first night audience.
Did you speak to her?
No! The police arrive and I report what I'd seen, as I did here.
Witness?
Mr. Van Fleet, can you tell us when you started in the employ of Mrs. Faulkner?
October 12th, last.
Can you tell us the date of Mr. and Mrs. Faulkner's wedding?
October 13th, the day after.
So in other words, Mrs. Faulkner hired you to spy on her husband the day after their wedding.
So it seems.
What were Mrs. Faulkner's instructions to you when you were hired?
To watch Mr. Faulkner and report every action in detail.
Any special attention to Miss Andre?
Not specified.
Had Mr. Faulkner been calling on Miss Andre after his marriage?
Yes, frequently.
In the daytime?
Seldom.
Did you report that to Mrs. Faulkner?
I did.
What was Mrs. Faulkner's reaction to such reports?
Mrs. Stevens. Mrs. Faulkner is a lady, and as such, she has no reaction.
Did she seem worried?
Don't believe she did. Mr. Faulkner was the most devoted of husbands, and he loved his wife dearly.
Just how do you know that?
Well, those aren't her words.
Can you tell us exactly what time you started for the Skytop nightclub on the evening of January 16th?
11:52 p.m.
How long a walk is it from the Faulkner building to the skytop?
3 minutes.
What time did you arrive on the balcony of the skytop?
1:17.
So it took you exactly 25 minutes to reach the balcony? What were you doing the rest of the time?
Well, the Skytop nightclub has an open dance floor and other things.
And did you take advantage of these other things?
Well, I just had a couple of drinks, if I understand the drift of your curiosity, but that doesn't mean you can say I was intoxicated.
I have said nothing of the kind. As yet. Now, you said that you saw Miss Andre pushing Mr. Faulkner off the roof, and it was a little distance away in the darkness, and you were, well, shall we say you just had a couple of drinks?
The drinks had nothing to do with it.
Are you quite certain that she was pushing Mr. Faulkner? Isn't it possible that she was struggling with him?
It's an awfully funny way of struggling with a man. If I were struggling with a man, I wouldn't be hoisting him up by his... Well, I wouldn't be struggling with a man! I mean...
Mr. Van Fleet, can you tell us what Mrs. Faulkner's instructions to you were when you came here to testify?
Well, testify? I received no instructions of any kind, Mrs. Lawyer. I may inform you that Mrs. Faulkner was taken to California by her father to rest her shattered nerves.
Do you think Mr. Faulkner's suicide is very flattering to Mrs. Faulkner?
No! That has to be against the law!
How much do you think a witness to Mr. Faulkner's murder would be worth to Mrs. Faulkner?
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained.
I should like to remind Mrs. Stevens that she may be sued for making insinuations such as these.
I made no insinuation, Mr. Van Fleet. I merely asked a question in a general way.
Well, I would like to remind you, in a general way, that perjury is not part of a private investigator's duties.
No special notation to the rule?
None!
That is all, Mr. Van Fleet.
Oh, I have 2 more questions for you, Stevens.
Well, certainly, Miss Andre. What are the questions? What kind of car do you drive, Mr. Van Fleet?
Brown 2-door Buick sedan. Last year's model.
Did you see any car following the man in the gray coat as he drove away, Mr. Van Fleet?
I can't recall that I did.
That is all.
Pretty heavy at the time. Thank you.
I shall ask the witness to collect his belongings before leaving. Thank you.
Inspector Sweeney? Inspector Sweeney?
They got some confident on the case.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Name?
Elmer Sweeney,
Occupation?
Inspector of Police.
On the night of January 16th, were you called upon to investigate Lord Faulkner's death?
Yes, sir. I was one of the first officers to reach the spot.
And did you question Miss Andre?
Not right away. Before I could do anything, that fella Van Fleet rushed up to me and yelled that he had seen Tara and Andre throw Faulkner off the roof.
And how did Miss Andre react to this?
She was stunned, her eyes wide fit to burst. Then crossed my heart, sir, she started laughing. I thought she'd gone like crazy.
And what did you do?
I ordered her held for questioning, and we took her up with us in the elevator to examine the penthouse. What a joint.
And did you find anything unusual in the penthouse?
Unusual. Yes, sir. The bedroom.
And where'd you find your bedroom?
Nightgowns, sir. Lace nightgowns. Just about made of thin air. A crystal bathtub in the bathroom. We turned the shower on, and the water was perfumed.
Inspector, I believe you misunderstood my question. I wasn't referring to the aesthetic values of the penthouse, but rather if you found anything that could be connected to Bjorn Faulkner's death.
Yes, sir. In the living room.
What'd you find in the living room?
A letter was lying in plain sight on the table, and you just read to whoever finds it first.
Is this a letter?
Yes, sir.
Would you kindly read it to the jury?
If any future historian would like to record my last advice to humanity, I would like to say that I found the two enjoyable things on this earth whenever doors were open to me. My whip over the world and carrying Andres. To those who can use it, this advice is worth what it has cost mankind, the John Faulkner.
Submit as evidence.
Accepted as Exhibit A.
Did you question Miss Andre about this letter?
I did. She said that Faulkner wrote it and put it on the table and told her not to touch it. Then he went out to the roof garden. She struggled with him when she realized what he was about to do. She couldn't stop him.
Did you ask her who had been with him that night?
I did. She said 2 gentlemen had. They were friends of Mr. Faulkner's, and she had never seen them before. He picked them up in a nightclub that evening and brought them along. She said the names were Jerry White and Dick Saunders.
Did you try and find any men by these names among Mr. Faulkner's acquaintances?
We did. We found that no one had ever heard of them.
And Miss Andre told you, as she did at the inquest, that she had never heard of these 2 men before?
Yes, sir.
Was she very emphatic about that?
Yes, sir. Very.
That's all, Inspector.
You said that Miss Andre struggled with Faulkner to prevent his suicide. Did you notice any evidence of a struggle in her clothes?
Yes, ma'am. Her dress was torn. It had diamond shoulder straps, and one of them was broken, so that she had to hold it up with one hand.
What did you think of that?
Do I have to answer?
You certainly do.
Well, I wished he had broken the other strap.
I meant, did it look as though the dress had been torn in a struggle?
It looked like it, yes, ma'am.
Now, can you tell us why on earth you turned the shower on in the bathroom?
Well, you see, we heard Faulkner had wine instead of water in it.
You mustn't believe all the legends you hear about Bjorn Faulkner. That's all, Inspector.
Magda Svenson?
Magda Svenson?
Who says Magda? Magda, no. Magda.
Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
What is your name?
Know it, just call me.
Kindly answer my questions without argument. State your name.
Magda Svenson.
Occupation?
I am housekeeper.
And by whom were you employed last?
By Herr Bjorn Faulkner, and before that his father.
And how long have you been employed by them?
I've been in family 38 years. I remember Herr Bjorn since he was a child.
When did you first come to America?
I've been here 5 years now.
What were the duties of Mr. Faulkner assigned to you?
I keep penthouse for him. He visits every year or so, and I stay even after he go, but I never been employed by this one.
Now, Mrs. Svensson...
Miss Svenson!
I beg your pardon, Miss Svenson. What do you know about the relationship between Miss Andre and Mr. Faulkner?
A decent woman like me shouldn't know of such things, but sin is shameless in this world.
Tell us about it.
From very first day this woman appeared, she was sleeping with Herr Faulkner. It isn't good thing when man forgets his line between his bed and his desk, and she put her claws tight on both. Sometimes they talked loans and dividends in bed. Other times the door to his office was locked, and under the window shades that was drawn, you could see her lace panties on the windowsill.
We object, Your Honor.
I think Miss Andre should have objected many years ago.
Such a line of testimony is outrageous.
These are facts pertaining to the vital question of the relationship.
Silence, counsel. I shall ask the witness to word her testimony more carefully.
Sin is sin by any name you call it, Judge.
Miss Benson, do you know of any instance where Miss Andre's conduct was detrimental to Mr. Faulkner in any other ways than moral?
I do so. You drank account of all the money he wasted on that woman.
Did you give us an instance of Mr. Faulkner's extravagance?
Yes. He had a platinum gown made for her. That's right. I say platinum. Fine mesh. Fine, soft as silk. She would wear it on her naked body. He would make a fire in the fireplace, heat the dress, and then put it on her. And when it cooled, you could see her body in silver sheen, and it'd be more decent if she had been naked. She would ask him to put it on as hot as she could stand it. And when it burned her shameless skin, she laughed like the pagan she is, and he kissed the bro. Wild like tiger!
Your Honor, we object. This testimony is irrelevant and only tends to prejudice the jury against Miss Andre.
Let her talk, Stevens. Perhaps you may prejudice the jury in my favor.
Well, Stevens, you have my sympathy. Your client isn't an easy one to handle.
Silence. Objection overruled.
Did you observe Mr. Faulkner's attitude toward his marriage?
Yes. He was happy for first time in his life. Like a decent man was found right road.
Do you know of anything that made him worry in those days that could have brought him to suicide eventually?
No, nothing.
Now tell us, Miss Svenson, what was Miss Andre's attitude toward Mr. Faulkner's marriage?
She sat silent. She sat like stone statue. She was me. Nancy.
Mrs. Faulkner?
I understand you wanted to call me as a witness, Mr. Flint?
I do, Mrs. Faulkner. We're both from California.
It was. I escaped. Father was concerned over my health and he wouldn't let me come back. I wanted to do my duty towards the memory of Nancy.
I express the deepest appreciation, Mrs. Faulkner. We'll contact you soon. Shortly. Now, Mrs. Svenson, you were telling us about...
Miss Svenson. Miss.
You were telling us about Miss Andre's attitude toward Mr. Faulkner's marriage?
I say she keeps silent. But I hear her crying one night. Crying and sobbing when that was first and only time in her life.
She seemed to suffer much.
Suffer? Not her. One man more or less make no much difference to her. I see her unfaithful to Herr Faulkner on the night of his wedding.
Unfaithful with whom?
I don't know, man. I see him first time at the night of Herr Faulkner's wedding.
Tell us about it.
Well, I gone to them. It was beautiful. My poor Herr Bjornal, handsome, and his wife and lovely like Lily. Excuse me for a minute. There is... But she not go to wedding!
Miss Andre stayed home?
Yes, she stay home. I come back early through servant's door. She not hear me come. She's home, but she's not alone.
And who was with her?
He was. The man, out on the roof in the garden. It was dark, but I could see. He was holding her in his arms, and I think he wanted to crush her bones. He bent her back so far, I think she fell into her own reflection in the pool. And then he kissed her, and I think he never gets his lips off hers.
And then?
She stepped aside and say something. She speak very softly, I cannot hear. He not say words, he just take her hand in his and hold it against his lips so long I get tired of waiting to go back inside.
Did you ever learn the name of that man?
No?
Did you ever see him again?
Once, yes. Yes, once.
And that was?
The night of January 16th.
Tell us about it.
Well, she was acting very strange that day. She called me and said, I have rest of day off. So I been suspicious.
Why did it make you suspicious?
My day off is Thursday and not ask for second day. So I said, my day off is Thursday and not ask for second day. She said, she not need me. So I go.
What time did you go?
About 4 o'clock. But I want to know secret. I come back.
What time did you come back?
About 10 o'clock at night. The house is dark and silent and she not home, so, I wait. Half hour later, I hear them come, but I see Herr Faulkner with them, so I been afraid to stay. Before I go, I see 2 gentlemen with them, though. One gentleman, he drunk, I not know him.
Did you know the other one?
The other one, he was tall and lanky and had sharp cheekbones. He was the man I seen kissing Miss Andre.
Thank you, Miss Svenson, that's all.
Stand.
Just a minute, Miss Svenson. You still have to have a little talk with me.
What what? I say all I know.
You may know the answers to a few more questions. Now, you said you had seen that stranger kissing Miss Andre.
Yes, I did.
You said it was dark that night when you saw him for the first time.
Yes, it was dark.
And on the evening of January 16th, when you were so ingeniously spying on your mistress, you said that you saw her come in with Mr. Faulkner, and you hurried to depart in order not to be caught. Am I correct?
Wow, you have good memory.
You just had a swift glance at the two gentlemen with them.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the drunken gentleman looked like?
How can I? No time to know this face at door and too dark.
So, it was too dark, and you were in a hurry, and yet you were able to identify a man you had seen but once before?
Look here, Missy, I am under oath, as you say, and I'm a religious woman, and I respect oath. But I say it was same man once, and I say it again.
That is all. Thank you, Miss Svenson.
Yeah.
Nancy Faulkner?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Kindly state your name. And what was your relation to Lady George Faulkner?
I was his wife.
Now, Mrs. Faulkner, I realize how painful this is to you, and I can only express the deepest of my appreciation. I respect your courage. But I will have to ask you many questions that will awaken sad memories.
My name is Flint.
When did you first meet your husband?
In August of last year,
And where did you meet him?
at a ball given by my friend, Sandra Van Rensselaer, New York.
Will you kindly tell us about it, Mrs. Faulkner?
Sandra introduced us. I remember she said, "Here's a tough one for you, Nancy. I wonder whether you'll add this scout to your well-known collection." Sandra had always insisted on exaggerating my popularity, but I danced with them that night. We danced in the garden under the trees, and we stopped by the edge of a pool. The faint sound of the blue Danube waltz filling the silence. Mr. Faulkner reached up to pick a rose for me. As he tore it off, his hand brushed my bare shoulder. I don't know why, but I blushed. He noticed it and apologized, graciously smiling. Then he took me back to the guests. I think we both felt a silent understanding that night, but we did not dance again with each other.
And when did you see him again after that?
3 days later, I invited him to dine at my Long Island residence. We had a real Swedish meal I cooked it myself.
Did you see him often after that?
Yes, quite often. In fact, his visits became more and more frequent until the day
Until the day of what?
he proposed to me.
And kindly tell us about it, Mrs. Faulkner.
It was a beautiful day, bright, cold sunshine. Mr. Faulkner and I had gone driving, and I just remember driving my car, and I felt so young and so happy that I grew reckless that. Sorry, it's still a little hard for me to talk about those days. I grew reckless enough to lose my way. So we stopped on some strange country road, and I laughed and I said, "We're lost. I've kidnapped you and I won't release you." He responded, "The ransom you want is not in circulation." And suddenly he seized my hand and staring straight at me said, "What's the use of pretending? I love you, Nancy."
I'm so sorry, Mrs. Faulkner. If you wish to be dismissed and continue tomorrow, you know.
That's all right. I'm okay. We can go on. It was then that I first learned about the desperate state of Mr. Faulkner's affairs. He said that he had to tell me the truth and that he could not ask me to marry him if he had nothing to offer, but I loved him. So I told him that money had never meant anything to me.
Did you seem hopeless about the future after your engagement was announced?
No, not at all. He said that my faith and my courage helped him so much. I told him it was our duty to save his enterprises, our duty to the world he had wronged, not to ourselves. I had helped him realize his past mistakes, and he was ready to atone for them. We devoted our life to this service and welfare programs.
Did you remain in New York after your marriage?
Yes. Mr. Faulkner and I made our home in my Long Island residence, and he gave up his New York penthouse.
And did he tell you of his relations with Miss Andre?
No, not then. But he did 2 weeks later. He said, "Dearest, there's a woman. There was a woman, and I feel I must tell you about her."
And what did he tell you?
He said, "Karen Andre is the cause and the symbol of my darkest years. I am going to dismiss her."
And what did you reply?
I said that I understood, but that we mustn't be cruel. So I asked him whether he could find another job for Miss Andre. He said that he'd provide for her financially, but he never wanted to see her again.
So he therefore dismissed Miss Andre voluntarily of his own choice?
Mr. Flint, there are two kinds of women in this world, and my kind is never jealous of the other.
What was your husband's business situation after the marriage?
I'm afraid I don't know much about business, but I do know that my father made a loan, a very large loan, to my husband.
Mrs. Faulkner, do you think it is at all possible that your husband had any reason to commit suicide?
I think it totally impossible.
Did he ever speak of his plans for the future?
We often dreamt of the future together, even the night before his death. We were sat in front of the fire in the study talking about the years ahead. We knew that we would not be wealthy for a long time, if ever. We didn't care about that. We had renounced material concerns with all their consequences. Pride, selfishness, ambition, the desire to rise above our fellow men. We had devoted our life to spiritual values. We planned to leave the city, be part of some modest community, to be like everyone else.
And this was on the night of January 15th, the day before his death?
Yes.
And what happened on the day of January 16th?
He spent it in town on business as usual. He came home late in the afternoon. He said that he had to attend a business banquet that night in the city, so he would not be having dinner at home. He left at about 6 o'clock.
And what banquet was your husband supposed to attend?
He did not tell me, and I didn't ask. I made it a point to never interfere with his business.
Did you notice anything peculiar when he said goodbye to you that night?
No, not at all. He kissed me and said that he tried to come home early. And he stood in the doorway and watched his car drive away until it disappeared in the dusk. And as I stood there, I couldn't help but think about how happy we were, what a perfect dream our love had been, like a delicate ideal. I didn't know that our beautiful romance would, indirectly, through jealousy, bring about his death.
We object, Your Honor. Move that be stricken out.
The witness's last sentence may go out.
Thank you, Mrs. Faulkner. That is all.
Will you kindly be able to answer a few more questions now, Mrs. Faulkner?
As many as you wish, Miss Stevens.
You said your romance was like a perfect dream, didn't you?
Yes.
A sacred troth that regenerated a soul.
Yes.
A beautiful, uplifting relationship based on mutual trust.
Yes.
Then why did you hire a detective to spy on your husband?
Well, you see, I didn't hire a detective to spy on my husband. I hired him to protect Mr. Faulkner.
Will you kindly explain that?
Well, you see, some time ago, Mr. Faulkner had been threatened by a gangster. Regan, I believe they call him that. Mr. Faulkner paid no attention to it. Nothing could intimidate him, but I was worried. So as soon as we were married, I hired Mr. Van Fleet to watch him. I did it in secret because I knew that Mr. Faulkner would object.
How could a sleuth following at a distance protect Mr. Faulkner?
Well, I heard that the underground has a way of finding out those things, and I did not think they would attack a man who was constantly watched.
So all Mr. Van Fleet had to do was watch Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner alone?
Yes.
Not Mr. Faulkner and Miss Andre?
Miss Stevens, that supposition is insulting to me.
I haven't noticed you sparing insults, Mrs. Faulkner.
I apologize, Miss Stevens. I assure you that was not my intent.
Now, you said Mr. Faulkner told you he never wanted to see Miss Andre again.
Yes, he did.
How do you explain the fact that he called on her after your marriage? He called on her often and at night. Your detective told you that, didn't he?
Yes, I knew it.
How do you explain it?
I cannot explain it. How can I know what blackmail she was holding over his head?
How do you explain the fact that Mr. Faulkner lied to you about the business banquet on the night of January 16th and went directly to Miss Andre's house?
Miss Stevens, if I could answer that, we would have an answer to my husband's mysterious death. All I know is that she made him come to her home for some reason he could not tell me, and that he was found dead that night.
Mrs. Faulkner, I'd like you to answer one more question.
Yes, Miss Stevens.
I would like you to state here, under oath, that Bjorn Faulkner loved you.
Bjorn Faulkner was mine.
Thank you. That is all.
That's not all. Ask her another question, Stevens.
What is it, Miss Andre?
Ask her whether she loved him.
I did, Miss Andre.
Then how can you speak of him as you did? How can you sit here and lie about him when he can't come back to defend himself?
I won't stand for this! Why should I be questioned by the murders of my husband?
That's all.
The court will now recess for lunch.
attention? All right. Superior Court Number 11 of the State of New York. The Honorable Judge, Heath, presiding.
People of the State of New York, this is Karen Andre.
Ready, Your Honor?
Ready, Your Honor.
District Attorney may proceed.
If Your Honor, please, the prosecution has one more witness to introduce. John Graham Whitfield.
John Graham Whitfield. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
John Graham Whitfield.
Your occupation?
I am president of the Whitfield National Bank.
Were you related to the late Lee Faulkner?
I was his father-in-law.
No, Mr. Whitfield, it is quite obvious that you were well qualified to pass financial judgment. So would you tell us the state of Mr. Faulkner's business situation at the time preceding his death?
I shall say it was desperate but not hopeless. My bank made a loan of $25 million to Mr. Faulkner in an effort to save his enterprises. Needless to say, that money has been lost.
And what prompted you to make that loan, Mr. Whitfield?
He was the husband of my only daughter. Her happiness has always been paramount to me. But my motives are not entirely personal. Realizing the countless tragedies of small investors that the crash would bring, I consider it my duty to make every possible effort to prevent it.
Now, is it possible that you would have risked such a considerable sum in Mr. Faulkner's enterprises had you believed them to be hopelessly destined to crash?
Certainly not. It was a difficult undertaking, but I had full confidence that my business acumen would have prevented the crash, had Faulkner lived.
So he therefore had no reason to commit suicide as far as his business concerns were?
He had every reason for remaining alive.
Now, Mr. Whitfield, can you tell us Mr. Faulkner's relations in his family life and his relations with your daughter?
Mr. Flint, I would like to state that I've always considered the home and the family as the most important institutions in our lives. You will believe me then when I tell you how important my daughter's family and happiness was to me. And she had found perfect happiness with Mr. Faulkner.
Mr. Whitfield, what was your opinion of Mr. Faulkner?
I must admit he had many qualities of which I did not approve. We were as different as two human beings could be. I believe in one's duty above all. Bjorn Faulkner believed in nothing but his own pleasure.
From your knowledge of Bjorn Faulkner, would you consider it at all possible that he committed suicide?
I consider it absolutely impossible.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. That is all.
Mr. Whitfield, were you very fond of your son-in-law?
Yes.
And you never disagreed with him? You never lost your temper in a quarrel?
Miss Stevens, I never lose my temper.
If my memory serves me right, there was some kind of trouble at that time you made that stupendous loan to Mr. Faulkner. Wasn't there said something to the kind that you denied making the loan?
Purely a misunderstanding, I assure you. I must admit, Mr. Faulkner made a somewhat unethical attempt to hasten that loan, which was quite unnecessary, since I granted it gladly for my daughter's sake.
You said your fortune has been badly damaged by the Faulkner crash.
Yes.
And your financial situation is a bit strained at present?
Yes.
Then how could you afford to offer a $100,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of Guts Regan?
Your Honor, we object. What does that have to do with the case?
Your Honor, I should like to have the privilege of explaining this.
Very well.
I did offer such a reward. I was prompted by a feeling of civic duty. The gentleman, commonly known as Guts Regan, is a notorious criminal. I offered that reward for information that would make his arrest and conviction possible, though I agree with Mr. Flint that this has nothing to do with the present case.
Can you tell us why you left for California in such a hurry before the beginning of this trial?
I think the answer is obvious. My daughter was crushed by the sudden tragedy. I hastened to take her away, to save her health, perhaps her life.
You love your daughter profoundly.
Of course.
You've made it a point that her every wish be granted?
I can proudly say yes.
When she, or you, desire anything, you don't stop at the price, do you?
We don't have to.
Then would you refuse to buy her the man she wanted?
Miss Stevens!
You wouldn't stop if it took your entire fortune to break the first unbreakable man you'd ever met?
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained.
Now, Mr. Whitfield, are you going to tell us that your money had nothing to do with Mr. Faulkner dismissing Miss Andre? That no ultimatum was delivered to him?
You are quite mistaken in your insinuations. My daughter was no more jealous of Miss Andre than she would be of Mr. Faulkner's soiled underwear. All men have some at one time or another.
I'd be careful with statements such as these, Mr. Whitfield. Remember that your daughter paid for what Karen Andre got free.
You're you goddamn me! Do you know who I am? Do you know I can crush you like a cockroach as I crush many a better?
Just what I wanted to prove. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield.
Your Honor, we move that outrageous remark which led to this incident be stricken out.
The remark may go out.
People rest.
Move that the case be dismissed for lack of evidence.
Denied.
Exception, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. We cannot pass judgment on Karen Andre without passing it first on Bjorn Faulkner. He had put himself beyond all present standards, whether it is below or above them. It is a matter for each of us to decide personally. But I'll ask you to remember that he was the man who said he needed no justifications for his actions. He was the justification. The man who said that laws were made for the fun of breaking them. If you'll remember that, ladies and gentlemen, you'll understand the life that which he was thrown into and to his last few months was as impossible to him as that of a tiger in a vegetarian cafeteria. And in order to escape it, he would be driven to the most desperate means, including suicide. Our first witness will be James Chandler.
James Chandler?
Of the palace within my dreams, and you know we're on each other's team. I'm kind of over getting told to throw my hands up in the
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
James A. Chandler.
Your occupation?
Handwriting analysis expert for the New York Police Department.
Do you recognize this letter?
Why, yes, this is the letter found in Bjorn Faulkner's penthouse on the night of his death. I was called upon to examine it.
What were you asked to determine?
I was asked whether to determine this letter was written by Bjorn Faulkner.
What is your verdict?
I do believe that this letter was written by Bjorn Faulkner.
Your witness.
Mr. Chandler.
Yes.
It has come to your attention during the inquest that Miss Andre was in the habit of signing Faulkner's name to unimportant documents. You compared those signatures with real ones.
Yes, I have compared them, and I can applaud Miss Andre on her craftsmanship. The difference is very slight.
Then, given Miss Andre's knowledge of Mr. Faulkner, is it possible that she could have forged this letter so perfectly as to escape detection?
I do believe it is not probable, but it is possible.
That is all.
Siegurd Jungquist.
Siegurd Jungquist.
See the diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings in the movies, and I'm not proud of my address.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
What is your name?
Siegurd Jungquist,
Your occupation?
secretary to Herr Faulkner.
How long have you held that job?
Since beginning of November, since Miss Andre left.
What was your position before that?
Bookkeeper to Herr Faulkner.
How long did you hold that job?
8 years.
Did Mr. Faulkner give you Miss Andre's position when she was dismissed?
Yes, he did.
Did Miss Andre instruct you in your new duties?
Yes, she did.
What was her behavior at that time? Did she seem angry, sorry, resentful?
No. She was very calm, like always, and she explained everything clearly.
Did you notice any trouble between Miss Andre and Mr. Faulkner at that time?
Frau Lawyer, there can be no more trouble between Herr Faulkner and Miss Andre as between you and your face in a mirror.
Have you ever witnessed any business conferences between Mr. Faulkner and Mr. Whitfield?
I never been present at conferences, but I seen Herr Whitfield come to our office many times. Herr Whitfield, he not like Herr Faulkner.
What makes you think that?
Well, I heard what he said one day. Herr Faulkner was desperate for money, and Herr Whitfield asked him, sarcastic-like, what he was going to do if his business crashed. Herr Faulkner shrugged and said lightly, "Oh, commit suicide." Herr Whitfield looked at him, very strangely and coldly, and said, very slowly, "If you do, be sure you make a good job of it."
If Your Honor please, I would like to report this incident, which I consider a hoax, and whose purpose I would like to determine. A man has just called on the telephone and asked to speak to me immediately. When informed that it was impossible, he said the following message just texted to me. "Do not put Karen Andre on the stand until I get there. No signature."
I want to go on the stand immediately.
May I ask why, Miss Andre?
Question me now, Stevens.
I'm afraid it's impossible, Miss Andre. We have to finish the examination of Mr. Jungquist.
Then hurry. Hurry.
I shall ask the defendant to refrain from further interruptions.
Now, where were you on the night of January 16th?
I was in our office, in the Faulkner building. I was working. I've been working late for many nights.
What did you do when you heard of Mr. Faulkner's death?
I wanted to call Herr Whitfield. I called his home in Long Island, but butler say he no home. I called his office in town, but there is no answer. No one there. I called many places, but not find Herr Whitfield. Finally, I have to call his home again and tell Mrs. Faulkner that Herr Faulkner committed suicide.
And when you told her that, what were Mrs. Faulkner's first words?
She said, "For God's sake, don't give it to the newspapers."
That is all.
Just one moment, Miss Andre. Why such a hurry? Who were you expecting? Mr. Jungquist, you've been employed by Bjorn Faulkner for over 8 years now, haven't you?
Yes.
Did you know all that time how crooked and criminal your boss's operations were?
No, I did not.
You now know that he was a criminal and a swindler.
I did not know that.
You don't, huh? And you didn't know what all those brilliant financial operations of his were?
I knew that Herr Faulkner did what other people not allowed to do, but I never worried, and I never doubt. I knew that it was not wrong.
And how did you know that?
Because he was Herr Faulkner.
That he could do no wrong?
Herr Lawyer, when little people like you and me meet a man like Herr Faulkner, we take our hats off and we bow. Sometimes we take orders, but we do not ask questions.
Splendid, my dear Miss Jungquist. Your devotion to your master is worthy of admiration. You'd do anything for him now, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And are you very devoted to Miss Andre as well?
Miss Andre was dear to Herr Faulkner.
In such matters, a few lies would mean nothing to you?
We object, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
I'm not lying, Herr Lawyer. Herr Faulkner is dead and cannot tell me to lie. But if I had a choice, I'd lie for Herr Faulkner rather than tell truth for you.
For which statement I'm more grateful than you can guess, Herr Jungquist. That is all.
Karen Andre?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
That's useless. I'm an atheist.
The witness has to affirm regardless.
I affirm.
What is your name?
Karen Andre,
What was your last position?
secretary to Herr Bjorn Faulkner.
How long have you held that position?
10 years.
Tell us about your first meeting with Bjorn Faulkner.
I met him in his office on an obscure side street of Stockholm. He was alone. It was my first job. It was his first office.
How did Faulkner reach you?
He got up and didn't say a word, just stood and looked at me. His mouth was insulting even when it was silent, and I didn't know whether I wanted to kneel or slap his face. I didn't do either. I told him what I'd come for.
Did he hire you then?
No. He said I was too young and he didn't like me, but he threw a stenographer's pad at me and told me to get down to work. He was in a hurry. So I did.
And you worked all day?
All day. He talked as fast, almost faster than he could speak. He didn't give me a chance to say one word. He never smiled, but he never took his eyes off me.
When did he first
take me? That first day I met him.
How did that happen?
He seemed to delight in giving me orders. He acted as if he were cracking a whip over an animal he wanted to break. And I was afraid.
Because you didn't like that?
Because I liked it. So when I finished my 8 hours, I told him I was quitting. He didn't answer. Then he suddenly asked me if I'd ever slept with a man. I said no, I hadn't. He said he'd give me 1,000 kroner if I went into the inner office and took my skirt off. I said I wouldn't. He said if I didn't, he'd take me. I said try. He did. After a while, I got up and picked up my clothes. But I didn't go. I stayed. I kept the job.
And you worked, lived, and rose to success together ever since?
For 10 years. When we made our first 1,000,000 kroner, he took me to Vienna. We sat in a restaurant where the orchestra played Cosmic Love. Then, when we made 10 million, he took me to Delhi. We stood on the shores of the Ganges on the steps of a temple where men had been sacrificed to gods. Then, when we made 25 million, he took me to New York. He hired a private plane to fly us over the city, and the wind waved Bjorn's hair as a banner over the world at his feet.
Can you tell us the extent of Mr. Faulkner's personal fortune at the height of his success?
No, and he couldn't tell you himself. He had no personal fortune. He took what he wanted. When he owed money to one of his companies, it was crossed off the books and indebted to several other concerns. It was all very simple. We prepared the balance sheets ourselves.
Why did a man of Mr. Faulkner's genius resort to such methods?
He wanted to build a gigantic net and build it fast, a net over the world held in his own hand. He had to draw limited sums of money. He had to establish his credit. So he paid dividends out of his own capital, dividends much higher than he actually earned.
When did Mr. Faulkner's business difficulties start?
About a year ago.
What brought him to America this time?
A short-term loan of $10 million from the Whitfield National Bank was coming due and we couldn't meet it. Bjorn had to get an extension, but Whitfield refused until his daughter came into the question.
How did that happen?
Bjorn met her at a party. She made it obvious that she was greatly interested in him. Then one day, Bjorn came to me and said, "Karen, we have only one piece of collateral left and you're holding it. You'll have to let me borrow it for a while." I said, "Of course, what is it?" He said it was himself. I asked, "Nancy Whitfield?" He nodded. I didn't answer at first. It wasn't very easy then. But then I nodded. I said, "All right, Bjorn." He asked, "Will that change anything between us?" I said no.
Had Mr. Faulkner proposed to Miss Whitfield?
No. She proposed to him.
How did that happen?
He told me about it. She took him for a drive one day and stopped on a lonely road. She said they were lost and that she'd kidnapped him and wouldn't release him. He answered that the ransom she wanted was not in circulation. Then she turned to him point blank and said, "What's the use in pretending? I want you and you know it. You don't want me and I know it. But I pay for what I want, and I have the price." He answered, "And that is?" She said, "The extension of a certain $10 million loan which will need to save your business. If you stay out of jail as a swindler, it can only be in the custody of Mrs. Bjorn Faulkner."
That's a lie! That's a shameless lie!
Anyone disturbing the court mistakes will be asked to leave the courtroom.
What was his answer to that, Miss Andre?
He said, it'll take you an awful lot of money. She answered, money's never meant anything to me. He said, will you always remember that it's a business deal? You're not buying any feeling. You're not to expect it. She answered, I won't need any. You'll have your money and I'll have you. It was decided that Bjorn would be given an extension on the loan and would be given unlimited credit. Such was the bargain.
Was Mr. Whitfield eager to accept that bargain?
Bjorn said he thought Mr. Whitfield would have a stroke when his daughter's decision was announced to him. But Miss Whitfield insisted. She always gets her way. And the bargain was agreed upon.
So, in other words, Mr. Faulkner sold himself as his last security?
Yes, and like the others, it meant nothing to him.
Did you resent the marriage?
No. We had always faced our business as a war. We looked at this as our hardest campaign yet.
Why did Mr. Faulkner dismiss you 2 weeks after his wedding?
He was forced to do that. Whitfield refused to advance the money he'd promised.
What reason did he offer for that refusal?
The reason? That Bjorn was keeping a mistress. I had to be dismissed.
And did Mr. Whitfield grant the loan after you were dismissed?
No. He attached what he called a slight condition to it.
What was that condition?
He wanted the controlling interest in Bjorn's enterprises.
Did Faulkner agree to that?
Bjorn said he'd rather gather all his stock certificates in a pile and strike a match.
And did Mr. Whitfield grant the loan?
No, he didn't grant it. Bjorn took it.
How did he do that?
By forging Whitfield's signature on $25 million worth of securities.
How do you know that?
I helped him do it.
And did this help Mr. Faulkner?
Only temporarily. Certain dividend payments were coming due and we couldn't meet them. Bjorn had stretched his credit to the utmost. There was no more to be had.
How did Mr. Faulkner take the situation?
He knew it was the end.
What were his plans?
You don't find men like Bjorn Faulkner cringing in front of a bankruptcy commission, and you don't find them locked in jail.
And the alternative?
Bjorn was not afraid of the world. He had defied its every law. He was going to leave it when and how he pleased.
Get away from me! What's Regan?
Don't say anything! Larry, please don't say anything! You promised to stay away!
Stand there! You don't!
Your Honor, I demand for this man not be allowed to testify!
Why, Miss Andre?
Wait, don't say a word!
Your Honor!
Stop her, for God's sake, stop!
Silence! Your Honor, this man loves me! He'll say anything to protect me! He'll lie! Don't believe a word he says!
Karen, the sacrifice is useless. Bjorn Faulkner's dead.
He's dead?
Yes.
Bjorn's dead?
Then you know it, Miss Andre.
Shadow
Daddy.
People of the state of New York versus Karen Andre.
Ready, Your Honor.
Your Honor, please, I'd like to report that I have issued a warrant for Regan's arrest, as he is obviously an accomplice in this murder. But he has disappeared. He was last seen with the defense counsel, and I would like to...
Keep your shirt on. Who's disappeared? What do you suppose I've been for? Just to give you guys a thrill? No need to issue any warrants, I'll stay here. If she's guilty, I'm guilty.
The defense may proceed.
Karen Andre. Miss Andre, when you came here to testify, did you know the whole truth about this case?
No.
Do you wish to retract any of your testimony?
No.
When you came here, did you intend to shield anyone?
Yes.
Whom?
Bjorn Faulkner.
Do you still find it necessary to shield him?
No. It's not necessary anymore.
Do you still claim that Bjorn Faulkner committed suicide?
No. Bjorn Faulkner did not commit suicide. He was murdered. I didn't kill him. Please believe me, not for my sake. I don't care what you do with me now, but because you cannot let his murder remain unpunished. I'll tell you the whole truth. I lied at the inquest. I lied to my own attorney, and I was gonna lie here. But everything I've told you so far has been true. I'll tell you the rest.
You were telling us Mr. Faulkner's way out of his business difficulties, Miss Andre.
I told you he was going to leave the world, but he wasn't to kill himself. I did throw a man's body off that penthouse, but that body was dead before I threw it. It was not Bjorn Faulkner.
Please explain this to us, Miss Andre.
Bjorn wanted to be officially dead. No searches or investigations were to bother him. That suicide was staged. He had had the plan in mind for a long time. He had kept $10 million in the Whitfield forgery for it. But we needed someone who could help us. Someone who could not be connected to Bjorn in any way. There was only one such person, Regan.
What made you believe that Mr. Regan would be willing to help in such dangerous an undertaking?
He loved me.
And he helped you in spite of this?
He helped me because of that.
What was the plan, Miss Andre?
Regan was to get a corpse, but he wasn't to kill anyone for the purpose. We waited. On the night of January 16th, Lefty O'Toole, a gunman, was killed by rival gangsters. His murderers have long since confessed and been arrested, so you can be sure that they had nothing to do with it. That you can be sure that Regan had nothing to do with the murder. But you may have remembered reading in the papers that O'Toole's body disappeared mysteriously from his mother's house. That was Regan's work. O'Toole's height, measurements, and hair were the same as Bjorn's. He was the man I threw off the penthouse.
Was that the extent of Mr. Regan's help?
No. Regan was to get a plane and fly Bjorn to South America. Bjorn had never learned to operate a plane, but Regan used to be a transport pilot. On the day of January 16th, Bjorn transferred the $10 million to 3 banks in Buenos Aires under the name of Rangar Hedden. A month later, I was to meet him at the Hotel Continental in Buenos Aires. Until then, the 3 of us were not to have any contact with each other. No matter what happened, we were not to reveal the secret.
Tell us what happened the night of January 16th.
Bjorn came to my house that night. I'll never forget his smile when he stepped out of the elevator. He loved danger. We had dinner together. At 9:30, we went to Regan's. He had O'Toole's body dressed in traveling clothes. Then we drove back to my house. Bjorn wanted us to be seen entering the building, so I didn't use my key. I rang the doorbell. We were dressed formally to make it look like a gay party. And Bjorn and Regan supported the corpse as if he were a drunken friend. The night watchman opened the door and we went up in the elevator.
And then, what happened?
Bjorn and the corpse switched clothes. Then he wrote the letter. Then Regan and Bjorn carried the body out to the balcony, left it leaning against the parapet. Then we said goodbye. Bjorn was to go first. He went down to the elevator. I watched the indicator needle tick down. 50 floors down. Then it stopped. He was gone.
And then?
Regan was to follow a few minutes later. They were to meet 10 miles out of the city where Bjorn had stashed the plane. I waited alone in the apartment. I didn't want to wait out on the balcony with the corpse, the body that was supposed to be Bjorn. So I lay on the bed in the bedroom. I waited for an hour. I took one of Bjorn's robes and I buried my face in it. I could almost feel the warmth of his body. There was a clock by the bed that ticked in the darkness. I waited. After an hour had passed, I knew that the plane had taken off, so I went out to the balcony. I looked out over the city. There were so many lights. The world seemed so small, so far away. Then I pushed the body over. I thought of all Bjorn's troubles went with it. I didn't know this light went too. That is all.
I must confess, Miss Andre, there's not much left for me to do. You seem to have done all my work yourself. Now tell us, did Mr. Faulkner have a clear conception of the differences between right and wrong?
Bjorn never thought of things as right or wrong. To him, it was always, you can or you can't. He always could.
And yourself, didn't you object to helping him in all those crimes?
To me, it was only he wants or he doesn't.
You said that Bjorn Faulkner loved you?
Yes.
Such as he was?
Because he was who he was. That's why I loved him.
Did he ever ask you to marry him?
No. What for?
Don't you know there are laws made for situations such as these, Miss Andre?
Laws made by who, Mr. Flint, and for who?
Miss Andre, did your attorney warn you that anything you say here can and will be used against you?
I'm here to tell the truth.
You loved Bjorn Faulkner?
Yes.
Such as he was?
Because he was who he was.
Exactly, Miss Andre. Now what would you do if a woman were to take the man you loved and you worshipped so insanely? If she were to appeal to his soul rather than to his animal desires that you seem to have done so successfully? If she were to change the ruthless scoundrel that you loved into her own ideal of an upright man, Miss Andre, would you still love him?
We object, Your Honor. Objection sustained.
I want to answer. I want the district attorney to know that he's insulting Bjorn Faulkner's memory.
You do, but you not thought of nothing of insulting him while he lived by having an affair with a gangster.
Don't, Larry. You're wrong, Mr. Flint. Regan loved me. I didn't love him.
And he didn't demand the usual price for his help?
He demanded nothing.
You had enough information to put him in jail at any time, Bjorn Faulkner?
I'd never do that.
But you could, if you wanted to?
I suppose so.
Well, isn't that the explanation of Mr. Faulkner's visit to you after his marriage, Miss Andre? He wanted to reform, he wanted to change, but you, Miss Andre, you held it over his head. You could ruin his plans at any time, and you could expose him before he could even make good for his crimes. Wasn't it fear, Miss Andre, and not love that held him in your hands?
Bjorn Faulkner didn't know the meaning of the word fear.
Miss Andre, who knew about that transfer of $10 million to Buenos Aires?
Only myself, Bjorn, and Regan.
And Regan. Now, Faulkner could have had perfectly legitimate business reasons for that transfer?
I don't know of any.
You mean you won't tell of any, Miss Andre? Now, Bjorn Faulkner kept you in extravagant luxury for over 10 years. You enjoyed platinum gowns and other little things like that. You hated to change your mode of living, to see him hand all of his money over to investors to see him poor, now didn't you?
I was never to see him poor.
No, of course not, because you and your gangster lover over there were going to murder him and take the $10 million that no one even knew about.
We object, Your Honor. Objection sustained.
Maybe I don't understand you correctly, Miss Andre. You were raped by a man the first day you saw him. You lived with him for 10 years in a brazenly illicit relationship. You defrauded thousands of investors the world over. And you cultivated a friendship with a notorious gangster. You helped in a $25 million forgery. You told us all this proudly, flaunting your defiance of all decency. And you don't expect us to believe you, Miss Andre, capable of murder?
You're wrong, Mr. I am capable of murder. For Bjorn Faulkner's sake.
Thank you, Miss Andre, that's all.
Lawrence Regan.
Lawrence Regan?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
What is your name?
Lawrence Regan?
Your occupation?
Unemployed.
How long have you known Miss Andre?
5 months?
Where did you first meet her?
In Faulkner's office. I went there to do some business with him. I gave up the business because I'm their secretary.
How did you happen to become friendly with Miss Andre?
Well, that first meeting wasn't exactly friendly. She wouldn't let me in see Faulkner. She said I had enough money to buy orchids by the pound and that I had no business with him, boss. I said I'll think it over. And when? I thought it over. Only I didn't think of the business. I thought of her. Next day I sent her a pound of orchids. Ever see how many that makes? That's how it started.
Did you know of Miss Andre's relations with Mr. Faulkner?
I knew it before I ever saw her. What of it? I knew it was hopeless. I couldn't help it.
You never expected Miss Andre to return your feeling?
No.
You never made any attempt to force it upon her?
Do you have to know all that?
I'm afraid we do.
I kissed her. Once. By force. It was the night of Faulkner's wedding. And she was alone. And she was so unhappy. And I was so crazy about it. She told me it was no use. I never wanted to know. But she knew. We never mentioned it since.
When did Miss Andre first tell you of Faulkner's planned escape?
About 2 weeks before we both.
Was Lefty O'Toole one of your men?
No.
Were you connected with his murderers in any way?
No.
You really had no definite knowledge of O'Toole's planned murder?
No. I just had a way of guessing.
Tell us what happened on the night of January 16th.
It all happened as Miss Andre has told you. But she knows only half the story. None of the rest.
Tell us what happened after you left the penthouse.
Left 10 minutes after Faulkner. He had taken my car. I had one of my men leave another car for me at the door. I stepped on it. Full speed.
Where did you go?
It's Meadow Lane, about 10 miles out in Kingstown. I had left my plane there earlier in the evening and Faulkner was to get there first and wait for me.
What time did you get there?
About midnight. It was a bright moon. I turned off the road and could see tire tracks in the mud where Faulkner's car had passed. I drove onto the lane. And then I thought I'd lost my mind. The plane was gone.
What did you do?
I searched the lane for 2 hours. Faulkner's car was there, where we'd agreed to hide. It was empty. Lights turned off, key in the switch. I saw tracks on the ground with the plane had taken off. But Faulkner couldn't fly it himself.
Did you search for any clues to this mystery?
I searched like a bloodhound.
Did you find anything?
I did. One thing, I found the car.
What kind of car?
It was very deep in the bushes on the other side of the lane. It was a big black sedan.
What did you do?
Well, I wanted to know whose car was. So I smashed the window, crawled into the back seat, and settled down to wait.
How long did you have to wait?
The rest of that night.
And then?
Then the owner came back. I saw him coming. His face looked strange. He had no hat, and his clothes were wrinkled and grease-spotted.
What did you do?
I pretended to be asleep in the back seat. I watched him. He approached, opened the door, and then he saw me. He gave a start and yell as if he'd been struck in the heart. His nerves must have been jittery.
Then what did you do?
I waked with a start, stretched, rubbed my eyes and said, "Oh, it's you. Fancy such a meeting. I don't think you liked it." He asked, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I said, "The name's Regan. You may have heard it. I was in a little trouble and had to hide for a while. We find this car here was quite a convenience." He said, "Well, that's too bad, but I'm going to have to ask you to get out. I'm in a hurry."
Did you get out?
No. I stretched and asked what's the hurry. He said, "None of your business." I smiled and explained, "It's not for me. You see, it happens that a certain colonist is a friend of mine, and he'll appreciate the story about a gentleman of your prominence found wandering in the wilderness at Mukner time. But I'm sure I'd like to have the whole story."
What did the man say?
He said nothing. He took out a checkbook and looked at me. I shrugged and looked at him. And then he said, "Would $10,000 be a suitable token of appreciation to keep your mouth shut?" I said, "It'll do." Lawrence Regan's the name. He wrote out the check. Here it is.
I offer this check in evidence.
What's all this nonsense, Regan? Who was the man?
Who is the man, Mr. Regan?
Let the clerk read that check to you.
Kindly read the check.
January 17th, paid to the order of Lawrence Regan, the sum of $10,000. Signed, John Graham Whitfield.
It's an outrage! To see that check.
Silence! If there are any further interruptions, I shall order this courtroom clear.
We offer this check in evidence.
Objection.
Objection overruled. Admitted in evidence.
What What did you do after you received this check, Mr. Regan?
I put it in my pocket and thanked him. Then I drew my gun, stuck in his ribs, and said, "Now, you lousy lizard, where's Faulkner?" He opened his mouth like a fish choking. He couldn't make a sound.
Your Honor! Is this man to be allowed to make such statements in public while in my presence?
The witness is allowed to testify. If it is proved to be perjury, he will suffer the consequences. Proceed, Miss Stevens.
What did he answer, Mr. Regan?
At first he muttered, "I don't know what you're talking about." But then I jammed the gun harder and said, "Cut it! I've no time to waste. I'm in on it and so are you. Where did you take it?" He said, "If you kill me, you'll never find out."
Did you get any information out of him?
Not a word. I don't want to kill him. Yet. He said, "If you expose me, you'll expose the fake suicide and Faulkner will be found." I asked, "Is he alive?" He said, "Go and ask him." I talked and I threatened. It was no use. I let him go. Thought I could always get him.
Then did you try to find Mr. Faulkner?
I didn't lose a second. I rushed home, changed my clothes, grabbed a sandwich in an airplane, and flew to Buenos Aires. I searched. I advertised in the papers. I got no answer. And no one called the banks for Ragnar Heber's millions.
Did you try to communicate about this with Miss Andre?
No. We had promised to stay away from each other for a moment. And she had been arrested for Faulkner's murder. I left when I read that. I couldn't say a word. Not to betray him if he was still alive. I waited.
What were you waiting for?
February 16th, at the Hotel Continental in Buenos Aires. I set my teeth and waited every minute of every hour of that day. He didn't show up.
And then?
And then I knew he was dead. We came back to New York and started a search for my plane. We found it. Yesterday.
Where?
In a deserted valley in New Jersey. It had been landed and fire set to it. I recognized it by the engine.
Was it empty?
No. I found the body of a man.
Could you identify him?
No one could. It was nothing but a burnt skeleton. But the height was the same. It was Faulkner. I examined the body, or what was left of it. I found 2 bullet holes. One in a rib over the heart, and the other straight through the right hand. He didn't die without putting up a fight. He must have been disarmed first, shot through the hand, and then murdered defenseless straight through the heart.
That is all.
So what is your business, Mr. Regan?
You'd like me to answer, wouldn't you?
Objection. The witness has a right not to answer that question.
Objection sustained.
Mr. Regan, what do you do when prospective clients refuse to pay protection?
I'm legally allowed not to understand what you're talking about.
Very well, you don't have to understand. May I question you as to whether or not you read the newspapers?
You may.
Well, question. Will you kindly state as to whether or not you read the newspapers, Mr. Regan?
Occasionally.
And did you happen to read that when Mr. James Sutton Vance Jr. refused to pay protection to a certain gangster, his magnificent country house in Westchester was destroyed by an explosion just after the guest left, barely missing a wholesale slaughter? What was that, Mr. Regan? A coincidence?
A remarkable coincidence, Mr. Flint. Just after the guest left.
Did you happen to read that when a Mr. Van Dorn refused to pay...
Your Honor, we object. Such questions are irrelevant.
Objection sustained.
So you had no ill feeling toward Mr. Faulkner for the failure of your business with him?
No.
Now, Mr. Guts, Mr. Lawrence Regan, now what would you do if a man were to take the woman you love so much and, let's say, rape her?
I'd cut his throat with a dull saw.
You would, and you don't expect us to believe you, Guts Regan, gangster, outlaw, scum of the underworld, would step aside with a grand gesture and throw the woman you love so much into another man's arms?
Your Honor, we...
You don't understand. I loved her.
You did? Then why'd you allow Faulkner's visit to her after his marriage?
I have nothing to say about that.
No? And you two didn't hold a blackmail plot over his head?
Got any proof of that?
Association with you is the best proof.
Objection.
Objection sustained.
How did how did the man kill Faulkner in the penthouse that night?
Objection.
Objection sustained.
Where's the other accomplice, the man who played the drunk?
I can give you his exact address. Evergreen Cemetery, Whitfield Family Memorial, which is the swankiest place poor Lefty's ever been.
Now, let me get this clear, Mr. Regan. You claim that the man buried in Evergreen Cemetery is Lefty O'Toole and that the man burned in the plane is Bjorn Faulkner?
Yes.
And what's the proof that it isn't the other way around, Mr. Regan? Supposing you did steal O'Toole's body, what's the proof that you didn't stage that fantastic thing yourself, that you didn't plant the airplane and the body in New Jersey, and then appear with that wild story on a desperate attempt to save your mistress? You've told us that you'd lie for her, that you'd do anything for her, wouldn't you?
We object, Your Honor. Objection sustained.
Where's the real proof, Mr. Regan?
Mr. Flint, you're a district attorney. And well, you know what I am. We both have a lot of dirty work to do. Such happens to be life, or most of it. But do you think we're both so low that if something passes us to which one kneels, we no longer have eyes to see it? I loved her, and she loved Faulkner. That's our only proof.
That's all, Mr. Regan.
John Graham Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield, would you object if I got an order to exhume the body buried at Evergreen Cemetery?
I would have no objection, but that body has been cremated.
I see. Now, where were you on the night of January 16th?
I believe I was in New York on business that night.
Do you have any witnesses who can prove it?
Miss Stevens, you must realize that I'm not in the habit of providing myself with alibis. I've never had any reason to keep track of my activities or to secure any witnesses. We'll not be able to find them now.
How many cars do you own, Mr. Whitfield?
4.
What are they?
One of them is a black sedan, as you were so evidently anxious to learn. I may remind you that it is not the only black sedan in New York City.
You have just returned from California by plane?
I have.
You flew it yourself?
I did.
You're a licensed pilot, then?
I am.
Now that story of Mr. Regan's is nothing but a lie in your opinion, isn't it?
It is.
Then who wrote that $10,000 check?
I did.
Will you kindly explain that?
It's really quite simple. We all know Mr. Regan's profession. He had threatened to kidnap my daughter. I preferred to pay him off and then take any chances on her life.
The check is dated January 17th. On that same day, you announced your offer of a reward for Regan's arrest, didn't you?
I did. You realize that besides my civic duty, I also had my daughter's safety in mind, and I had wanted prompt action.
Your daughter and your fortune are your most cherished possessions, are they not?
They are.
Then what would you do to the man who took your money and deserted your daughter for another woman?
We object, Your Honor.
You hated Faulkner. You wanted to rape him. You suspected his intention of staging suicide. Didn't you? The words Mr. Jungquist heard you say prove it.
I suspected nothing of the kind.
Were you following him that day?
Certainly not.
Were you trailing him in your black sedan?
Fantastic. How could I have known it were Faulkner leaving, supposing it were Faulkner leaving? Van Fleet, the detective, didn't.
Van Fleet wasn't watching for a trick. He had no suspicion of the plot. You had.
My dear Miss Stevens, how could I possibly have known about the plot for that night?
You heard no particular information at that time?
None.
You heard nothing unusual that day?
Not a thing.
For instance, you did not hear that he transferred $10 million to Buenos Aires?
I never heard of it.
I killed him! I killed Mr. Faulkner! God help me! I'll never kill him! Oh, the whole truth! So help me God! I did not know, but I see it now! He killed Faulkner because he lied! He knew about the $10 million because I told him!
Look here, man, you can't just...
That's all, Mr. Whitfield.
No questions.
Kindly take the stand, Mr. Jungquist. Now, you told Whitfield about that transfer?
He asked me many times about the $10 million. Where it was spent. I did not know it was a secret, so that day, I told him at noon, January 16th.
You told Whitfield at noon?
I did. Did God have pity on me? I would give my life for Faulkner, and I have killed him.
That is all.
What kind of frail business?
Were you alone with Mr. Whitfield when you told him, Mr. Jungquist?
Yes.
So it is your word against his?
Yes.
That is all.
The defense rests. Any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
The defense may now proceed with the closing argument.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're here to decide the fate of a woman. But much more than one woman is here on trial. Before you pronounce your verdict on Karen Andre, you must think of your verdict on Bjorn Faulkner. Do you believe he was the kind of man who would bow, renounce, and repent? If you do, she's guilty. But if you believe in this sad, half-hearted world of ours, that a man can be born with life singing in his veins, a scoundrel, a swindler, a criminal, call him anything, but still a conqueror. If, deep in your hearts, you felt a longing for greatness, for a sense of life beyond the lives around you, if you've known a hunger which great timidity cannot satisfy, you'll understand Bjorn Faulkner. You'll understand the woman who is his priestess. Who is on trial in this case? Karen Andre? No, it is you, ladies and gentlemen, who are here on trial. It is your own souls that will be brought to light when the decision is rendered.
The district attorney may now proceed with the concluding argument.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for once I do agree with the defense counsel. Two types of humanity are represented in this case and both oppose each other. And your verdict depends on which side you choose to believe. I agree with the defense counsel that the judgment passed upon this case will pass deep within each one of your souls. The defense counsel asks you to take the side of a swindler, a harlot, and a gangster against a man who is a model of social responsibility and a woman who is the ideal of womanhood has been for centuries. If you believe that man is placed upon earth for a greater purpose than his own enjoyment, if you believe that love is not confined to the bedroom, but extends out to your family and to your fellow man, if you believe that selfless service to others is the most sacred ideal that a man can atone to, then you will believe that simple virtue is more powerful than arrogance, and that a man like Bjorn Faulkner can be brought to bow before it. Let your verdict tell us that none shall raise his head too high in defiance of our common standards.
The bailiff will now escort the jury to the jury room. I instruct you to consider your verdict carefully. You are to determine whether Karen Andre is guilty or not guilty of the murder of Bjorn Faulkner.
Examine the body of Bjorn Faulkner. I discovered a body mangled to an extreme degree.
Well, he was a bit tight, sir. He wasn't really steady on his feet. Mr. Faulkner and the other gentleman had to help him. They almost dragged him into the elevator.
She's hoisting the man's body onto the parapet. A man in evening clothes. Faulkner. He's unconscious. There's no resistance. She pushes him over with all her strength and he goes over. Down into space.
I found only two enjoyable things on this earth whose every doors were open to me. My whip over the world and Karen Andre.
He had a platinum gown made for her. She would ask him to put it on as hot as she could stand it. And when it burned her shameless skin, she laughed like the pagan she is, and he kissed the burn, wild like tiger!
He renounced material concerns with all their consequences. Pride, selfishness, ambition, the desire to rise above our fellow men. We devoted our life to spiritual values.
plan to leave the city, be part of some modest community, to be like everyone else.
It was a difficult undertaking, but I had full confidence that my business acumen would have prevented the crash, had Faulkner lived.
It is not probable that the letter was forged, but it is possible.
Herr Faulkner shrugged and said lightly, "Oh, commit suicide." Herr Whitfield looked at him, very strangely and coldly, and said, very slowly, "If you do, be sure you make a good job of it."
Bjorn never thought of things as right or wrong. To him, it was always, you can or you can't. He always could. To me, it was only, he wants or he doesn't.
Do you think we're both so low that if something passes us to which one kneels, we no longer have eyes to see it? I loved her, she loved Faulkner. That's our only proof. Attention of the court.
Prisoner will rise and face the jury. Mr. Foreman, have we reached a verdict?
We have.
What say you?
Find Ms. Andre guilty.
We shall appeal the case.
There will be no appeal. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll not be here to serve the sentence. I have nothing left to seek in your world.
I
would like to call Miss Amthor up to the stage. She did a great job, but this is her first production with the IAM League of Thespians. And on behalf of the cast, I would like to congratulate her and thank her for all her hard work and dedication with this miniature tableau signed by the entire cast.